This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV Prime. Every so often, a country comes along whose economic transformation has a vast impact on the world's climate system. For the past generation, that country has been China. Next, it will be India. A disclosure: these statements were lifted straight from the internationally reputed magazine The Economist in an October 2015 edition. The concerns hold today more than ever. Hello and welcome to the Realty Debate. I'm Manvi Dhillon. The state-owned National Housing Bank projects that India's real estate sector will cross $150 billion by 2020, building on initiatives such as the Smart City Mission and Affordable Housing for All. But how green will this development be? World Environment Day prompts us to address the big question. Challenges in building green projects. How are developers ensuring compliance? Well, let's find out from the specialists on the show today. Dr. Prem C. Jain, Chairman, Indian Green Building Council, formed in 2001 to ensure that India is a global leader in sustainable built environment by 2025. Sanjay Seth, Senior Fellow and Senior Director, Sustainable Habitat Division, the Energy and Resources Institute, and Chief Executive Officer, Griha Council. Griha is an acronym for Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment. It's a tool to assess a building against nationally acceptable benchmarks. Architect and town planner Tanmay Tathagat, Director, Environmental Design Solutions. Joining us from Mumbai, Arun Kashikar, Vice President, Research and Development, Tata Housing. And from Delhi, Sriram Khattar, Managing Director, Rental Business at DLF. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on the Realty Debate. I think I'm going to ask a very basic first question, and it goes to Dr. Jain, to try and understand what is a green project in the Indian context?
Well, the green building has been with us for centuries. All we are saying is build in harmony with the nature. What the climate, what the location, what the traditional practices is, use them to make your building. And I'm glad to share that India has taken in a very big way acceptance of the green building norms which have been laid down by the Indian Green Building Council, which is what I represent.
And we're going to examine just how rapidly and widespread that adoption is, or does it need to get more traction, Dr. Jain? We'll put that question to you in a moment. Mr. Seth, Griha, which is, I'm going to keep repeating what it stands for, the Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment. It helps assess a building, but it would be great to know, once again, for me, for our viewers, briefly, how does it work?
So, Griha establishes the greenness of a building against set benchmarks. It follows the underlying principles of what gets measured gets managed, and that's how we evaluate buildings once they are constructed, at the design and concept stage, followed by at the construction stage, and thereafter, once these buildings get operational, we evaluate their greenness in terms of their design intent.
Tanmay, are there any gaps in the conceptual framework? I hate to put a negative question to you first, but we're talking about the conceptual framework at this stage. So if you see any gaps, it would be great if you could spell them out.
Well, yes, there is. And that's a very large one. And that difference is between what is designed and what actually gets operational. All the buildings that are rated for a certain design. So at the time the construction happens, you look at what is the projected usage pattern, the number of people, and how they're going to behave in the building. And that's how you optimize the performance. In reality, by the time you go through the design, construction, commissioning, and handover process, a lot of things change. And the users very often are really not a part of the decision making because they come in a lot later. So the actual performance, which is to a large extent dependent on what the occupants do, what equipment they bring in, how they operate, if there is an energy efficient air conditioning system, do they know how to operate it? If there's a waste management system on site, does the RWA or the society have an idea of how to operate it? All those things are not covered in most of the rating systems that are looking at only a few factors at the time of design. There are other rating systems that come in later that look at real operations, but there is still a big gap between what you would see a design rating and what the actual performance is. And this has come out in numerous studies, both in India and internationally. So that itself is the big gap between what is a rated green building for design and what is a rated green building for actual performance.
And we'll explore that issue that you've raised ahead on the show. But Mr. Kashikar, I did want to try and get a sense of what Tata Housing is doing when it says it's involved in sustainable projects. Make it as real and digestible for our viewers as possible.
Yeah, so Tata Housing is guided by a sustainability vision. We have a sustainability vision which says you build sustainability in everything we do. So it starts from site selections, from site selection to a master planning and to execution and then handover. So the point which was raised just now, after handover, the project doesn't remain sustainable. We actually do a handover document which explains how the customer can take over the sustainable operations in future. And we also do the audit. We have done the audit and it has shown the benefits to the customer, actual benefits to the customer after they occupy it and stay. So it's the entire process right from site selection post handover.
Mr. Seth, I just want to bring you in at this stage, and I'm going to put a question to Mr. Khattar as well. But, you know, the design being rated, fine. What happens after handover? Do you buy that there is, a good start that's given when you have developers like Tata Housing ensuring that at least the ball is set rolling?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you see, I mean, the very fact that they have included in their very designed intents that the buildings need to go green, and which is followed up by once the buildings get operational, the customer is, it's the customer that is going to be using these buildings at the end of it, and they need to be what you call sensitized as to how these buildings need to be operated, what are the benefits that are going to accrue out of living of these spaces. And once they are aware of this, I think the concepts followed by the commissioning, I think all of that intent is captured very well.
And we'll talk about whether or not there's enough supervision post handover. But Mr. Khattar, this question's coming to you, and it's taking off directly from what the other specialists on the show have said today. Green practices after occupancy. Now, since you oversee the rental business at DLF, you'll actually have your finger on the pulse of what's happening once people are occupying those buildings. What's the connect? What's the thread that ensures that those practices get embedded, enshrined in everyday life after the project is handed over?
Yeah, so I think the sustainability and green, as Tanmay just said a little while ago, is split into two parts. One is at the time of design and construction, and the other is at the time of operations. Now, in the rental businesses of DLF, we move from design to construction, and then we own the buildings and give it on rent. So for us, seamless moving into ensuring that the sustainability is maintained is rather easier than giving it, selling it to third parties and making them aware of it and making them follow the norms. For us, just as an example, we had built a building in Gurgaon on Golf Course Road called Horizon Center, which was rated by the Indian Green Business Council. And after 1 year of operation, they've just got the same rating for the operations of the building. And for our other rental businesses, it is mainly in operations that we ensure that the sustainability and green is maintained.
Dr. Jain?
At the same time, all the new buildings that we are constructing, they are all rated at the time of design and construction, which we carry forward based on the norms which the Green Business Council have into operating and maintaining of the same buildings.
Dr. Jain, I was going to ask you, how routine is it to have, a review, once handover is complete, from the sample of projects and buildings that come your way? How, often does this rating or review get done every year for the foreseeable future?
Well, I'm very glad that the Tanmay raised the issue, because I can tell you about the Indian Green Building Council. From the day one, we started that we may design something, we may say something, and we do something different. It's inherent. So our rating is normally given, IGBC gives the rating only after building is occupied, not on design intent, and after a third-party commissioning and third-party visit. IGBC themselves repute their people to visit the building and ensure that what was being claimed at the design or to get the rating has been followed. Then only the rating is given. To give you the proof of the pudding, we reviewed, after some criticism exactly what Tanmay has raised, are the building actually performing what they talked about? As Khatta Sahab just mentioned about his own building, I'm glad to share with you, we are nearly about 1 billion square feet already certified, functional. And we reviewed about 25% of them. And very heartening to see that all 25%, without any exception, were doing at least as well, sometimes better, because the user got addicted to the environment of a green building in terms of energy saving, daylighting coming in, good water available, rainwater harvesting being done, sewage treatment plant, better indoor air quality. So we find the user drives the movement when the building is occupied beyond the builder or the developer.
Well, it's heartening to note that actually there's a change in the approach at the user end, because they're a powerful agent of change. I'm just going to take one measure of progress. And gentlemen, I acknowledge that, no measure comprehensively captures the changes and the extent of those changes in the Indian context. But Mr. Seth, Griha, for example, and correct me if I've got anything wrong here, but 268 buildings are registered for a Griha rating. Only 9 residential buildings actually have a Griha rating. So I'm just wondering, do we need to move faster and in a much more widespread manner? What, in a sense, is, holding back more people, more developers from actually opting for a Griha rating?
So a Griha rating, the rating per se is a slightly more stringent in terms of evaluation of the greenness of these buildings are concerned. As Dr. Jain said, that these buildings at the whatever is set for the designs are then post their occupancy, the ratings are delivered only once these have been evaluated as far as their greenness is concerned, post the operations of these buildings. Similarly, in Griha, once the building has been constructed and fully occupied, and after it completes 1 year of its operations, thereafter that the rating is awarded to the building. Having said that, the Griha rating has come up only in the last about 10 years that it has been in place. We have taken several measures. More and more developers have signed up with us. They have committed in the years ahead, I think about 50 million more square meters of their spaces that they are going to construct, and this is in the last 6 months that we have done. Many more developers have pledged that all future constructions are going to comply with Griha rating. So I see that there is a forward movement in this direction. People are getting more and more aware, and they are being sensitized through awareness workshops as to what green is all about, because there has been also a mismatch, or there has been a lack of information and awareness as to what green actually means to the end user. So I think with the sensitization, awareness workshops being done with the consumer, much more offtake from the ground is going to happen as far as these green buildings is concerned.
I want to bring you in to really assess whether the change, in your opinion, is widespread and fast enough. And here we are talking about smart cities. These are cities of the future, and I don't want to dwell on the past too much, but is there enough evidence that the future is shaping up differently?
Well, in one sense, what Mr. Satan, what Dr. Jain have said, does indicate that there is a very big change since early 2000s when the green movement formally took off, although there have been buildings that are efficient and sustainable for much longer than that. But even now, despite all of this, we are a fraction of overall construction. If you look at big developers, and even if all of them say start looking at green for one reason or the other, they're still not the majority of, say, construction in India. Majority of construction still happens in mid-size and small residential, commercial across the country. So in that sense, there is a long way to go. The formal green building certification still covers maybe 1-2% of the construction in the country. The rest is still the conventional way. Now, I want to go back to the earlier point that you'd asked, what is a green building? And from a national perspective, it's not just the building on a site that you're looking at. Every construction activity has an environmental impact. And the objective of a green building is to reduce that environmental impact. At the same time, provide a more comfortable, healthy, and a more convivial environment for the occupants. And sorry to continue, but one more point is that all the assessments that we're talking about, I would love to see a third-party independent assessment of performance and not self-assessments.
Yeah, sure.
That's a totally valid point. Mr. Kashkar, if you can be as honest as possible and say, pick 3 things that Tata Housing is doing differently today from what it was doing 10 years ago, for example. I think there'd be a lesson in that. So give us 3 specific examples of what you consider green practices that weren't really practices 10 years ago.
Yeah. So one thing, all our project, be it affordable or a premium, are green building, certified green building. So about 70 million square feet is under either pre-certification or a certification, IGBC, USGBC or GREHA. So all buildings, including affordable and value homes, are green buildings. That is one. We go much beyond just the certification. So one example is we have tied up with WWF for biodiversity conservation. So every project, before going to the project, we do a biodiversity impact study in that region. And then we make a guideline, biodiversity management guideline, which is then followed in the entire design and execution process.
Okay, Mr. Khattar, change is often driven by individuals, and at the demand end, are you finding that tenants throw the net wider, buyers as well, they're willing to pay a premium for green projects and they understand what the idea of some of these green projects is?
See, it's very difficult to say, give an answer in black and white on this, but once there is a building which is sustainable, green, and it provides environmentally friendly, a friendly environment to work in, I think the tenants obviously feel that if they pay a little more for it, they are doing it for their own benefit and good. It's difficult to quantify it, but yes, the benefit is there.
I hate to make these conversations anecdotal, but I'm going to take a quick break, and when we return, I will share some anecdotes which perhaps point towards violations, Delhi, Bengaluru, Chennai and beyond, and get your thoughts on what these violations really mean. Is it the norm? Is it the exception? Is there a different path forward? We'll get that answered after this break.